Running our own business isn't easy, and it can be a tough gig for all of us at times, and only other business owners truly understand the challenges that we face. And on ScaleUp Radio, we aim to help make things just that little bit easier by interviewing guests who have been where you are now, regardless of where you are on the ScaleUp journey, and maybe facing some of the challenges that you are facing. And they offer their thoughts and advice on what has worked well for them, as well as what didn't, of course. And we've also combined many of these lessons into a practical scale-up handbook called the Entrepreneurial Scale-Up System. And there's details of this at the end of the episode. So welcome to ScaleUp Radio. Welcome to another episode of ScaleUp Radio. Today I'm delighted to have with me Warren Munson, who is the founder of Evolve Advisory. Welcome, Warren.
Welcome, Kevin. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, great to have you on board. So you're a founder, you're an accountant, you're an advisor to business owners, you're a podcast host, and you're an author. Is there anything you don't do?
I'm not sure about that. Yeah, plenty of different hats, which has given me plenty of different experiences, Kevin, and a lot of lessons learned along the way.
Brilliant. No, sure. So we'll look forward to teasing out some of those. So tell us about Evolve Academy. What is that all about?
Yeah, so current kind of business is Evolve, and it's an advisory firm that helps businesses start, grow, and exit. We've got 3 programs called Ignite, Thrive, and Optimize, and we help entrepreneurial, owner-managed businesses go through that kind of growth curve from startup to the kind of exit scenario, or turning the business into a lifestyle business, whatever good may look like for them. And we do that through winning public sector support contracts and providing those, but also providing the advisory services and the training and development that's needed to their teams, both the leadership teams, but also the core individuals in the business. Because one of my lessons learned was, you can't do it alone. And actually, therefore, the previous business that I founded and still working, but sold, it was called Inspire, sold to a national firm of accountants, Azette, in 2022. I started that business thinking I could wear the Superman pants and do it all. And that business only took off when I started to trust and develop the team and develop a management team around me.
Yeah, that is such a key thing. It's a tough transition to make, isn't it? It's not. It sounds great, but it's not as easy as it might sound, is it?
No, definitely not. It was one of those. I probably had 2 or 3 false starts with it, and I can remember I founded Inspire in 2004. As I say, exited 2022. And it wasn't until about 2013, 14, I hit a real low, really was kind of at a low ebb, sort of 10 years into that journey. And it all of a sudden it clicked, and, found the team around me, started to trust, started to delegate, properly assign some roles and responsibilities to them. And all of a sudden things started to come together. But I'd had a couple of false storms before that where I'd hired people, it hadn't worked out. Actually, on reflection, they probably were, they were good people, but I just wasn't prepared or ready to let go at that point and trust and empower.
Okay, so you've had that journey where you've started up, run, scaled, and exited, which is great. And you've decided to go again with Evolve, did you?
Yeah,
glutton for punishment, are you?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think it's just that. I think there's this spirit inside me, Kevin, that says that actually, I really, the core of it and the purpose of it, and I suppose where the passion comes from, Kevin, is that I really want to help people, and I want to help them on the journey. And having developed a traditional professional services business, as I say, I realised it was the bits around the edge sometimes. It was when you connect people or put like-minded people in the room together and let them share their stories and experiences, and all you need to do sometimes is facilitate that through an event or a peer group, or hook people up to coach and mentor each other, and great things could happen. And that's really where Evolve came from, was actually still believe in the core professional services and what they can do to help business owners, particularly sort of independent business owners and founders, but also realized actually there's a whole lot more around the edges that means individuals can succeed. And it's that inspiration to help others that really got me going again and thought, okay, let's go again. Let's put some of that passion and belief, and that's where Evolve came from.
Okay, brilliant. And what sort of stage have you got Evolve to? That's fairly new, I guess, if you sold out 22 with Inspire.
Yeah, well, Evolve had started. What is quite an interesting journey, really, because some of that realization about those other services, that other offering, those things you could do around the edges, we were doing within Inspire. So we were doing within a traditional professional services environment. And we held for 3 years at a big conference centre in Bournemouth. We held this big conference, 200 to 250 people attending. It was, it was this entrepreneurial conference, and it was great. We were doing things like that, and all of a sudden we had some clients and some intermediaries that provided us with work saying, well, you're an events business, are you a coaching business, or are you still an accountants and tax advisors? And again, that was one of the things that it was that wake-up call. I'd kind of Crown Jewels was the professional services firm, and I was messing with the DNA, and I had to strip that out, and we did that, and that's where Evolve was formed. So Evolve was formed 2019. Obviously, it had the joys, as we all did, of the pandemic, and that hit it hard. Yeah. So I really think 2023 is the first year for Evolve that I think we're coming out of that startup phase and starting to see and understand what the business is, what it looks like, what the true offering for that business is, and how we may scale it going forward.
Yeah, excellent. So let's maybe come back to that in a minute, but I'm interested in your story of building the professional services firm.
Yeah.
And then, as you said, it sounds like you kind of expanded the range of services and offerings, and then you learned to bring it back again. So take us through. So when did you start up Inspire?
So that was 2004. So I'd had an offer of partnership in a large national firm. It was a great firm, great experiences. I always say, if I hadn't had that experience, that kind of corporate experience, I couldn't have ever done what I've done. Yeah. But I had this kind of burning desire in me to see what I was made of, and to try and do something different in the profession. So it was me, laptop. I often say it was me, laptop, phone and a desk. 2004. Sat in I wasn't much bigger than a cupboard in a managed service office building. And off I went. And that was the start of the journey.
Okay. So on starting your own, and what was the positioning of that business then? What was that?
So that business was really about helping owner managers at the time, and being very much their sounding board and offering advisory services. To begin with, we didn't offer any of the normal kind of compliance services that an accountant would offer. Soon learned that actually what people didn't want was a number of different people helping and advising them. So they wanted a one-stop shop. So we developed, by the end of year one, going into year two, we started to offer accounts, tax returns. We broadened the service offering. And by that time, we were 4 people. Okay. So we'd grown the team quite quickly. And had started to scale the business. So I'm pleased to say, love being part of a team. It wasn't just me, a laptop, phone, and a desk for too long. Yeah.
So how did you go about finding those first few people and bringing them on board with you? What sort of lessons did you learn along the way?
It is a really interesting one, isn't it? Because those first few hires, and it's the same in Evolve now, you find those people that really align with you and what you're doing and what you're looking to achieve. And they really believe in the DNA of the business. And they generally, my experience says, if I look back on Inspire and on Evolve, they have this shared passion with you.
Okay.
And when they do, that's brilliant, because, we might go on to talk about values and culture and all of those kind of things. But because my experience says, because you're the founder there and you hire those people that align, you don't talk about values and culture. You just get on and do it, and the business grows in a manner and a way in which you'd expect. And I've always been really strong at trying to share the vision and the direction of travel and where we're going and the ambition. And I think that makes a difference. So for me, one of the lessons and one of the things that I didn't ever do everything right, but one of the things that done right, I think, in my journey is find the people that align to you, bring them on board, and actually let them help you get through those initial months and years, because they are the toughest. There's no question about it. They are that point where you can, you question yourself, question, what you've done, why you've done it. So finding people that align with you and can support you is really important, in my opinion, Kevin.
Yeah, absolutely. So over those 14 to 15 years, what did you end up with in terms of the sort of size of the business? What did it look like at the end?
So we got to the point where we were 40 plus people, and we had grown to close to £3 million of fee income. I had two fellow directors, Chris and Andrew, big part of the story and journey. And, they'd brought in and acquired a small amount of equity in the business as well. So we'd got to the point where we had a leadership team. We were, 40 people. We'd grown significantly year on year. Had two fellow kind of equity partners around me, which was great.
And what were the core services then? How was that 3 million made up at that point?
Yeah, that's interesting, really. We always kept that ethos of being advisory led. So we always knew that our niche, our DNA was that we would help and support, and we'd advise, we'd provide the tax and business support that a owner-managed business owner or owners would want. But by the time we kind of got to the exit in 2022, we were probably 55% of our income was compliance, recurring income, and 45% was the advisory services. And I always say, and it's an interesting journey now, building Evolve is building an accountancy firm has a relatively easy path to it, because once you win a client, you'll get that recurring income stream. So long as you keep the client happy, deliver client delight, and do all of those things, and be consistent in what you do and do it well, then you'll keep the client. And therefore it's an easier business to scale.
Yes, you've got a base to work from all the time. You don't have to start from scratch every time the client finishes or whatever, project finishes or something.
Yeah, whereas many businesses and industries that, you and I both would support and know and work with, they haven't got that recurring income. Yeah. Every year it starts from zero. And they might have a client base they work with and know, and customers and products, with a reputation that's building. But it was easier building that professional services business because we had an incremental recurring income, as long as we continued to be focused and do the things that we needed to do.
Great. And was the advisory part of the business, was that recurring revenue as well, or was that ad hoc project stuff? How was that?
It was a real blended mix. We had some clients that we provided monthly support with, would sit in on, we provided a financial director on demand service. So that involved going in on a monthly, bi-monthly or quarterly basis. Some clients paid us a retainer for our advisory offering and services, but generally the other side of the business, the advisory, was more ad hoc, but we had the reputation for it. So our client base tended to work with us because they knew we had that breadth of offering, that depth. And so therefore they would typically want to buy that from us, if that makes sense.
Okay. So what were some of the key inflection points along that journey? Some of the key decisions, maybe the things that you got right, but maybe also things that maybe with a bit of hindsight you might have done differently. So if we start with some of the things that perhaps didn't go well, I think there was a period in the business, and this was probably years 6 to 10. So sort of if we split the journey into thirds, the second third of the journey, where it definitely was in the position where perhaps two things went wrong. Started to believe a little in my own hype. So, I'm honest enough to say I think the ego at times kicked in and got in the way, and I had to learn that the hard way. And also, perhaps for the same period of time, forgot about that focus, passion, and belief that I had in creating the business and what I wanted to achieve, and started to focus a little bit on the money too much. Yeah.
And two of those lessons are to keep that ego in check, but also, really passionate now about focus, because, this is what we did and it worked. Focus on creating a good business model that looks after its clients well, and the money will come. That's a consequence of doing things right. And I think so. There's plenty of other lessons along the way, but that was the most challenging period in the business.
And what at that point? So if you went from 0 to sort of 3 million at the that sort of period you're talking about in that middle third, where were you sort of in terms of people and turnover? Maybe.
Well, that's a good question. We were probably 15 to 20 people, and we were probably doing in that period somewhere in the region of 1.5 to 2 million of fees. So it was a fairly big beast.
Yeah,
and at that point, at that time.
And had you got a senior leadership team in place then, or did that come later with the team?
No, I think that came part of that realization in that stage of the journey was actually, you can't do it alone. You can't achieve the other things you want to achieve in life by just solely focusing on the business. And actually you've got to trust in others. And we had a situation where we did make a really bad senior hire at director level, because of those things I've said, the height, the ego, the money focus, and that went horribly wrong. And it was at that point where I remember we had a big 10th anniversary party, big black tie event, 150 people plus coming. And I remember turning to Kayla, my wife, the night before and said, and this was the low ebb, this was the moment, was that I turned to her and I said, if I actually just got on the stage tomorrow night and just thanked everybody for everything we've done, but that was it. Wow. There was to be no more Inspire.
Wow.
What you say and what you do. And clearly, I was never actually going to do it, but and she remembers that I asked the question. I said, what would you do? Because that's how I felt. But funny enough, and I think this is about having the right people around you, having the evening, hearing some of the stories of the things we'd done for people. We invited some of our team, all of our existing team were there, but some of the older team members there that had left us. And just hearing some of the things we'd done just gave that energy to go, okay, the business isn't in a bad place.
Yeah.
The realization is that I'm in a bad place and I've led the business to here, so I need to do something different. And that was the wake-up call to then. And actually, as all of that was happening and we'd exited the director, there was a few people in the business, Andrew and Chris included, that started to rally around. And it was right, okay, this is the moment, got to trust in them, got to make this happen. And off we went. And that really probably then led into that final third, which was, probably the most enjoyable element of the journey. So
describe how you then brought Andy and Chris, was it, into the business then to get them engaged? You obviously decided to give them some equity or allow them to buy in. How did you go about doing that?
Yeah, so it was a question of actually starting to think about what were my strengths, what were my weaknesses, and how could I play to my strengths, and how I could build a team around me that covered the weaknesses. And not just that, where did I have most impact and what put a smile on my face? And let's get, ultimately my business, let's get me doing the things that put a smile on my face, that I enjoy, that I'm good at, that play to my strengths. And let's recognize in others the skills that they have, delegate to them, and let them do the things they're great at. We also employed a lady called Bev, who became our ops director. So completely from a non-professional services environment, and to build the support team. And she did a great job. Let's build the support team. So not only did we get to the point where I was doing the things I wanted to do and enjoyed, everybody on the professional services delivery team were playing to their strengths as well. Yeah. And that made our model as a professional services firm completely different. We were one team. It wasn't a professional services and a sports team. We were one team. And it made a big difference to our whole ethos, our approach, our culture, and everything we did.
Great. And how did you keep that going? Because it's one thing to kind of kick it off, but it's another, isn't it, to keep that going? Because you still had another 4 or 5 years before.
Yeah. I think one of the realizations, and it is a lesson learned, is from my old corporate days, there was a partner there, a guy called Mike Bevis, God bless his soul. He passed away in 2021. And I brought him in as a non-exec for a couple of reasons. One is that ego piece. I trusted in him and he knew me to be able to tell me when I was being, to put it bluntly, when I was being an idiot.
Yeah.
And I would listen to him and he'd do that right. But more importantly, I brought him in to chair our director meetings so that it wasn't just my voice now. Everybody had a voice. Okay. And I think that was one of the big lessons, was giving everybody that platform and that voice.
Okay.
And he then also chaired, we had 2 levels of management. We had the kind of director team, but we had a management level in the business. Yep. And I didn't get involved in those meetings at all.
Right.
So Mike managed those, chaired those, and after a period of time, mentored, coached Bev to be able to do that. Mm-hmm. And I think that continued the momentum because it gave everybody a path. It wasn't a dictatorial environment. It wasn't absolutely dictatorial in the past, but it was clearly not dictatorial anymore. Everybody had a voice. Everybody had an opinion. People could make things happen. And I think that's what maintained that momentum, to answer your question, is that people were motivated and they felt that their contribution was really valued and it made a difference.
Great. And you hinted at values and culture early on, and initially the values kind of just were because you were attracting like-minded people. But did that get a bit more formal then at some point?
Yeah, it did actually. And I think we soon realized, probably, once we got to 10 plus people, it's interesting on that scale up journey, that, startup scale up, I think you can get to 10 people with relatively easy.
Yeah.
And as the founder or founders, you have influence over value and culture.
Yeah.
I believe once you get to around that 10 people mark, that dissipates and you've got to formalize, the values and make sure that there is a clear vision for the business and it's well communicated. And then make sure that those value, and we did the values, we did as a kind of exercise where I came up with the first pass of them as to this is what I think our values are. We then brought in somebody to facilitate a discussion with the team and got them to put forward their ideas, their thoughts, their values. And then we compared the two, compared and contrast. We had a bit of debate and we settled on what our values would be. So therefore, again, it felt like a unified approach. And I think, we've done the same late last year in Evolve, so to try and determine what our values are in the same and similar kind of fashion, because I think it's really important. But then I think where it goes really wrong, if you're not careful, is you've then got to live and breathe them.
Yeah, indeed.
And there's that kind of old motto here, isn't there? Do what is right, not what's easy. And sometimes if you set your values out, you can be tempted to sort of, bypass them and ignore them. But, the team seem to pick up on that. And therefore, it's not about just determining some culture, some values, creating some posters and sticking them to a wall. Yeah. It's about what do you do to embed them in the business, So again, it took a while to get this right, but post that 2014 inflection point, we made sure that we were talking about our values when we recruited people, when we appraised people, when we promoted people. We'd made sure that when we were bringing new clients on, that there was at least, some alignment in them to us. Because I think in a commercial entity, in a business, I think that's one of the mistakes that can be made, is that you go for growth, you go for this scale piece, and you say yes to every piece of work and every opportunity that's out there. And if those new clients don't align with you and your team, that's when we've all probably got examples of it. It doesn't go right, it doesn't go well, and you can disenfranchise, the team, and those compromises at times come home and bite.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. So, yeah. So sounds like that made a big difference to you in terms of the engagement of the people, the focus of driving things forward and making sure you got the right kind of business moving forwards. And one of the things that you hinted at earlier was that when you were in that final phase of maybe thinking about an exit, you started to reposition some of the services a little bit. And can you take us through some of that thinking?
Yeah, we started to think about who we were and what we were, and what a potential acquirer would like to see in us. Mm-hmm. And we also, we were building the business for growth and for sustainability. And we had this focus on making the business independent of me, I suppose, as the core founder. Yeah. And I think that's what we focused on. We didn't really focus on, and I'll explain why the exit came about in a moment, but we didn't necessarily focus on building a business for sale. We got to the point where that 40-ish people we needed to create a business that was independent of me. I'd spun out some of the services to evolve. I'd, sort of done a few other business angel type investments. I knew I wanted to split my time. So we started to focus on that. And I do think, and I suppose it's part of the advice I've always given our clients is, create a business that's independent of you, and you create a business that's got value. Yep. And you got to create a business that people will want to buy. And so that was the adage, really, was just, okay, the business now, it's 17 years old. It needed a life that perhaps would be beyond me. And the business needed to work independent of me. And we went through that journey. And that was really interesting. I suppose it was taking that leadership management team piece to the next stage. It was making sure that we had an idea of what our succession would look like, what did the next generation look like, and all of those things. And we were very clear in sharing, our path with the team. I think when I look back now, and if the team were listening to this, they're probably fair to say we were talking about succession for all and all of those kind of things. We probably weren't, because we probably weren't fully aware ourselves of where that was going to take us. But we talked about, we had a spider diagram that said, right, in 3 years, this is where we're going to be. We talked about what we wanted to do in terms of technology, fee growth, geographical spread, that we wanted to be, an employer of choice. We talked about succession for all, and that was on there and it was clear. So that's what we did, the direction of travel, to kind of, I suppose, answer your question in a more rounded way. We got to the point, Andrew, Chris and I, as shareholders, where we looked at the business and we thought, actually, this is a great business. We love it. We're on a great path, but we need further investment to invest further in expertise, resource, and technology, which is, professional services is, where you're at the moment. There's a lot of change in the professional services and the accountancy space. And we realized that at 40 plus people, I talked earlier that I thought 10 was a hurdle. Yeah. I think that 35 to 40 in our industry was another one. Yeah. And to break that ceiling, and we bounced against it a little bit, we needed that investment and, access to expertise, resource and technology, as I said. And that was the reason when Azets knocked on our door, we looked at them, we thought, actually, we liked what they were doing. We liked their principles. We liked their kind of strategy and values, and started a conversation, not knowing where it may lead. But that was in the late summer, autumn of 2021. And by February 22, we were part of Azets. Yeah. So it was a sort of 6-month process through to February 22.
Not too bad. And what surprised you about that process?
Oh, God, that is a really good question. I think one of my surprises was I spent my career doing tax advisory, business advisory, corporate finance, helping others on the journey. Yeah. God, did it feel different emotionally to be on the other side of the fence. I think, that raw emotion of you built this entity, it is your baby. and it may be in its teenage years, but you're going to need to start letting go of it, and you're going to make the decisions. And it definitely made me a better advisor as a result, because you learn that, you know, not all decisions you make are based on kind of raw intellectual kind of decision making, that emotional ties that you have to a business that you build kick in, and therefore you make sometimes a different set of decisions. So the biggest thing going through that process was the emotional journey that it take me on, and what it might feel like to be the other side of that.
Yeah, and some might question why you wanted to sell at that point, in a way, because I suppose you've already answered the question about you needed that extra investment. So what was it then that made you think about selling, perhaps, rather than actually going to the market maybe for that investment?
Yeah. So it's again a good question, and we had talked to some venture capital sort of funders that might provide the funding, and every time, and we did that on a couple of occasions, but on both occasions I felt that they were going to compromise who we were and what we were.
Right.
And actually, what I still want from this business, I'm glad to say it feels like we are on this journey 18 months after the disposal, is I wanted some legacy. So it may not say Inspire above the door anymore, but you know, we're a team of people, we're an office, we have a presence, we have a reputation in a marketplace. And I wanted that to be a legacy and to continue. So therefore we had to find a way of aligning ourselves with somebody or some entity or the acquirer or the funder that had alignment, wanted to be in the same market, doing the same kind of things in the same kind of way, and with similar values. And that was really important to us.
Yeah.
And if we hadn't have found that, there is no question we'd have continued to be an independent firm.
Yeah.
It was when we found the right acquirer that we looked back and we said, actually, this is the right thing to do.
Yeah. And what was it from Azette's point of view that they saw in you that they valued?
I think I'd like, be a good question to ask them. I think what they see in us and saw in us is that we were doing things differently. That's reflected well post transition. You know, the bit I've talked about Bev and our support team. Our support team have gone on to take on more regional roles within Azette's, which I think is a great testament to them. You know, a firm with 80 plus offices around the UK, and we're, you know, one of their smallest offices really, but we still, you know, our team have been recognised and been promoted and taken on regional roles. So that's it. So I think they saw us as something different. They liked our approach to the market, and the depth and breadth of our team. And I think what was different and remains different about this office is we were always had, I come back to one of the things I said right at the start, we had a niche, we had a focus, we knew who we were, we knew who we looked after, and therefore our client base really did represent where they were in the market and wasn't diluted with anything and anything in it. And I think they were our people, and that focus on a type of client with that advisory offering would be the things, and I've heard them say it, they would be the things that they wanted in us.
Great. And did you, as part of that deal, did you exit straight away essentially? Did on day one, are you still part of it?
So I split my time 50-50. So 50% of my time is focused on Evolve and a couple of other things, but 50% of my time is still dedicated to Azette, serving those clients. And that's been interesting because it's got me back to, I talked earlier as well about focusing on things that put a smile on my face and strengths. And I love looking after clients. So now, instead of having, I call it this backpack of responsibility, which is what I have when you own a business, I've been able to take that. It's been a transitional period. I've sort of taken the backpack off. It felt like I had a hand on it for a while, and so did Azette's. Yeah. And now, you know, I've really let go and they've got full responsibility for it. And I can spend time with clients again and getting out there, being part of the business community and doing things I love in it. So I think it's a blended approach, but it's also meant that entrepreneurial, I'm not sure I like that phrase, but I'll use it, that entrepreneurial spirit that I have, and that energy to create something can really focus into evolve. Whereas pre-transaction, clearly that was diluted across the business. And I think sometimes to get, and where we are with evolve in terms of, the journey is, as I said earlier, we're coming out of startup to scale, but I think you can only focus, the way I need to do it is I can only focus on one business. One business needs all my energy to get it to scale. And I think that's a reflection and lesson on, the Inspire piece that's led into evolve. And therefore, I've got a job, I'm employed.
What's that? Yes, what's that like?
Slightly quirky and unusual at times. It has its moments. But but I've also still got that ability to kind of dictate and influence my direction of travel and use that spirit I have and that acumen to scale evolve. And that's exciting.
And did you have a sense of what the business was, what Inspire was worth before you entered into those discussions? As an accountant, I'm imagining you probably did.
Yeah, so I think as an accountant, yes. And then our model is, it's a revenue-based, generally, effectively. There's a fairly fixed multiple for EBITDA, but it's really, there's a broad rule of thumb around revenue on it. So it was, that part of the transaction was relatively kind of known, easy. There was clearly some negotiations around it. Wanting the higher end of those as multiples, given who we were and what we were doing. But that was an easy part. And again, I suppose I look at it and I look at some of the clients we work with that, are product or IP based businesses, and the challenges they have in developing that IP, taking it to market, developing product, and all of those things. Maybe it's because of what I know, but I think a services business is so much easier to scale, grow, and exit.
Right.
I think you can create exponential scale.
Yes.
With IP and product.
Yes.
But I think it's a lot tougher journey.
Yeah. Yes, I think I get what you're saying. If you want to do something unique in the services world, then I think that's really, really tough. If you're following an established business model, then not so much. It's then a case of just doing it well, isn't it? And
agreed,
slightly better than the average competitor. But if you want to disrupt and want to change something in the service world, I think that's really tough.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Good. So, what would you advise to somebody going through that sort of that exit stage, that with a bit of hindsight, maybe?
Yeah, I think I would say focus on, be very clear at the start of that journey as to what you're doing and why you're doing it. Make sure you made some notes around that, because there'll be times during that journey experience through exit where you'll lose your way a little bit, you'll lose your focus. Every transaction has a point in the negotiations where it's the kind of, it's a yes or no moment. And there'll be difficult discussions. And unless you can get your head very quickly into that place of, I'm doing this because,
right.
Or, another phrase I would love is, good looks like X.
Yeah.
And you've got that's your kind of North Star. And you can always go back to that and go, right, I started this process, I started these discussions because this is what I wanted, this is what I wanted to achieve. And then you've got a reference point to make decisions in context as to, does this transaction now enable me to achieve that? And if it doesn't, then it makes it easier to make those hard decisions. And if it does, but you've got to make a couple of compromises on a few things, it puts them into context as to why you're doing that.
Yeah.
So that would be, I think that's probably the biggest tip. The other tip is to understand as you start the process that it is a period where you need to go into it being the best version of yourself, from an emotional point of view, an energy point of view, because it's a hard slog for that, for that 6 months.
Yeah.
Andrew, Chris and I were running the process. It was confidential. Bev was aware towards the end, but we were doing two businesses. We were doing our day job and we were doing the transactional work. Yeah. And even if you've got professional advisors around you, there's so much that falls on your shoulders as the owner in that process. So make sure you're prepared before you start, that you've got the energy, so that when you start, you can finish the journey. And then my other piece, and we employed a great lawyer that helps us through the ways, build the advisory team around you so that you've got the support. And I had this, great friend. We'd lost Mike at this point. Right. But I did make sure I had a friend, a close friend that also was a business owner in the loop, clearly on a confidential basis. So I had a sounding board outside of the environment to have a coffee, have a beer with, and kind of, at least I had somebody to be a sounding board. And I think that was really important, particularly, towards the end of the process, where even if things are going right, you are going to question yourself very much, as you said earlier, don't need to do this. Why are we doing this? Is it the right thing to do? So that would be my advice.
Very good. Excellent. No, very, very good. Very sound advice. So Evolve, what's the game plan with Evolve? What's the legacy you want to leave with Evolve then?
Yeah. So it's really interesting because the business started very much from provide the businesses directly with support and develop them and their teams, and build this kind of peer community of individuals that could help and support each other. But actually, one of the things, I talked about, the pandemic wiped it off its feet, really, and it was a really important period for some of the peer groups that we had, because we put them on Zoom. They all taught, all of those members are still members now. It's great. But what it did introduce, and where we saw the opportunity, is that government released money for business support, to help businesses, particularly in that startup and scale up stage. Yeah. So we've been fortunate enough across the South Coast, but particularly in Dorset and Hampshire, to win some of those some of those public sector contracts. Okay. So where I see Evolve going is that we'll very much focus our energy on providing that fully funded support within the kind of startup and growth phases. And then within the growth and exit phases, do that direct to business model, providing strategic reviews, so helping businesses understand where they are in their journey and what they need to do or what they could do next. Helping business, we've got a growth program where we go in and work with the leadership teams to understand what growth could look like for them, what the strategies for growth are, what their capacity looks like now, how they could plan for growth, and what do they need to do to ensure that when they formulate a plan, they can implement and execute. So have they got the right levels of employee engagement? What's their communication, in the business like? What's their leadership and influence like? And then develop, the owner, the leadership team, and as I said earlier, the wider team in the skills needed to support the strategic plan. And we've facilitated a number of strategic away days for leadership teams. So, there's more kind of formal process around the reviews, but just getting a leadership team in a room together for a day and get them to think about the big questions that business is facing. What's next? What their kind of strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats are, and get them talking and debating makes a difference. So really what I'm excited about with the Evolve piece is that, we continue on this journey, winning and tendering and winning the public sector contracts and work that supports, those businesses in their early stages of the journey. And then we provide the advisory services that help the businesses grow and then realize what their mechanism for exit may be, because our exit was an exit, but some it's create a lifestyle business, some it's pass the business to the next generation. And I don't think as business owners, as we come through that scale stage, we're often honest enough to have the conversations of what does good look like for us. And it is different for everybody.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really important part of the journey. So I want to help businesses achieve and do those things, Kevin.
Brilliant. Oh, excellent. And how does that divide work, that split work between assets and what you do? Because presumably they're still doing some of the business advisory work that you were doing with Inspire. So how's that?
Yeah, so that piece is around that we will provide the strategic advice, the facilitation, the training and development. And at the point at which they need to put in place, for example, an EMI share scheme, or they actually need to appoint a corporate finance advisor to take the business to market, then it sort of flips back. Their traditional professional services, that flips back to Azet. So we work with Evolve with a number of clients across the board, and many don't use Azet. So, they will then go to their traditional professional advisor to access those kind of traditional core services.
Very good. While I've got you, it'd be remiss not to ask really about the role that accountants play in business advisory, because obviously as AI comes in and everything else, the compliance aspect of an accountant's role, it arguably is becoming more commoditized, and there's all this talk about moving to advisory. What's your thoughts on whether that's the right move for accountants?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I looked at it the other day. I looked back in 2021. I put a slide up when we did our kind of, I suppose, State of the Nation, whatever you want to call it, town hall, update the team. And it had this diagram that I put together that says, in my view, the accountancy market is only going to go to two extremes. Is that, and there's some great firms out there that are adopting technology, AI, and delivering quite cost-efficient compliance services using technology, and delivering it well, and delivering, on my term again, that client delight in doing so. Yeah, there's other firms that need to be out there that continue to provide the compliance services, but their real focus is how do they help the clients on their journey, and they do that supported by the provision of compliance services. Yeah, but they're very much helping the client achieve results. And I think they're the two ends of the scale. Right. And I think where the profession needs to go is one end or the other of the scale. Yeah. Where this diagram showed is there's no man's land. Yeah. And if you get caught in no man's land, you won't, those kind of accountancy practices don't have a place in the market, will not exist in 10 years' time. Yeah. So you've got, and it's probably the same for legal and other professional services as well. Technology is great. It will drive down costs. There'll be clients that just want a cost-effective compliance service. That's great. Let the tech firms do it. As I said, there's some doing it really well. But if you're not in that place, you've got to move your firm. You've got to move the practice to actually support the client, use technology to deliver the more efficient technology service, but recognize your clients with you because they want a relationship, they want advice, and build your firm around that. So that would be my view of the market.
Yeah, no, it's interesting because we have a view very much around when we're creating competitive advantage. I mean, there's a bit about what markets we play in and that side, but then you've got your positioning, and it's either we've either got an offer position which is so much better than somebody else, so we ideally can charge therefore a premium for that, or we've got a cost position that means we can provide the same service as everybody else but at a cheaper cost. And you've just described that beautifully, and the dangerous ground is in the middle somewhere, because we're neither one thing nor the other. So we'll get beaten on the offer by other people, we'll get beaten on cost by somebody else, and we're stuck there in that middle. And in a market that's changing as rapidly as probably the accountancy market, and probably now because of AI coming into all sorts of markets now, that's just going to make that so much clearer as time goes on.
Yeah, absolutely aligned with your thoughts there. Yeah, it's exactly what's happening. Yeah.
All right. Brilliant. So, been fascinating talking with you, Warren. If we've got a couple of minutes for a couple of quick fire questions.
Oh, go for it.
Right. So, if you could go back to your younger self, what advice would you give yourself?
I would say believe in yourself more. I left school at 16, so probably I always had this little bit of insecurity in me. Was I worthwhile? Was I worth it? Particularly when I went into professional services where a lot of people had degrees. So believe in yourself more, but don't believe in yourself to the extent that you believe you're hype.
Yeah.
And learn to trust the people around you more at an earlier stage.
What resources would you recommend? Any books, podcasts, anything like that you'd recommend to entrepreneurs?
In terms of the resources out there, I think there's so much. There's so many books. I'm a big fan of some of Daniel Priestley's pieces and books, particularly The Key Person of Influence.
Yeah.
I think finding books of people that have been in your industry and that succeeded well in your industry, whatever that may be, and reading their stories and journeys, I think is invaluable. I love podcasts. Obviously, I'm a host of a podcast, but love podcasts. So I think things like the high performance, the Jake Humphreys high performance podcast.
Yeah.
Again, don't listen to them all. Pick the episodes. And a few of those kind of podcasts that talk about being the best version of yourself and understanding others' journeys, to me, are the resources that I would always tap into.
Brilliant. Good. Any apps or bits of software that you use regularly that you found particularly useful?
No, I don't. I'm not great with tech. Yeah. I'm a bit of a technophobe. I've got my iPhone and bits and pieces, but yeah, I suppose that was one of the reasons why I knew where we were in the marketplace and we needed to be something different. And as I said earlier, we had to sell because the tech piece was something that, I probably struggle with.
Yep, fair enough. Good. And what's your most successful marketing or lead generation tactic?
Business events, putting people in the room. Yep. So I talked about that conference that we did, that we fully funded that conference. So over 3 years, it was probably 100K investment. So it was a big investment for us, sort of 30 to 35K a year. But you put people in the room, it built our brand. It made people really resonate that the content we were going to deliver on that day really meant that we understood them, and it drove business to us. So for me, but that sounds like a big and grand scale, but we also do small dinners. So we do dinners with, put existing and potential clients in the room, put them around the table and just start some great conversation. So in our industry, I think getting out there, getting in front of people, but proving that you have the depth and knowledge and you care is what makes the difference.
Yeah, perfect. Brilliant. Well, it's been a pleasure to have you on, Warren, and some really great advice, great conversation. Thank you very much. If people would like to get hold of you and find out more about Evolve, what's the best way for them to do that, Warren?
So I'm Warren Munson on LinkedIn, so that's really easy to find. There's not many people with that name. So please do hook up with me on LinkedIn. You can go to www.evolveadvisory.co.uk, and there is also the Evolve to Succeed podcast. So put that into whatever platform you use, and you'll pop up with some of our stories and some of the episodes and some of the people that I've. It's been great to be on the other side. It's been slightly different, but yeah, there's some great conversations on there, like you have on ScaleUp Radio, with business owners about their journeys, and that's a great way to learn.
Fantastic. Super. Warren, thank you very much for being my guest on ScaleUp Radio today.
Thank you, Kevin.
I hope you enjoyed that discussion, and if you're building and scaling your own business, you might well be interested in our book, The Entrepreneurial Scale-Up System. And it's exactly what it says on the tin. It's a practical handbook around scaling a business in a structured way. And you can order a copy on all your favorite online retailers, including an audio version, or you can find it and other supporting resources on our website, www.esusgroup.co.uk. That's esusgroup.co.uk, which is esusgroup.co.uk.
This has been a Monkey Pants Productions podcast.